Do you have a balance due to the IRS and can't afford to pay it? Are you aware that there are things you can do to reduce your liability using credits and tax deductions you may have missed? Tune in to hear the multiple options available to you to potentially reduce or eliminate what you owe.
Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining me today. If you missed my last episode and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on my social media pages as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when my podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. Let me give you a little bit of background on my guest today. As a tax attorney for more than 30 years, Steve knows that clients' lives and livelihoods can be upended or even destroyed when the tax troubles arise. Steve started Moskowitz LLP because he saw that while big corporations were consistently navigating the tax code to their advantage, smaller businesses and investors were not. With prior experience as a CPA at a national accounting firm and with extensive experience in the corporate world, Steve knew he could help investors and smaller businesses by applying what he knew and wanted to make the critical difference in his clients' lives that protected them from the powerful government and enabled them to keep and enjoy the fruits of a lifetime of work that otherwise could be taken away from clients by the government in just one action. So, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me, and I'm doing my favorite thing in life, talking about taxes. Who could be more excited about anything else? And there's all types of things. When you get that dreaded letter from the IRS, I'm going to tell you what the resolution is, because we're all about resolution, solving problems.
Perfect. Well, I was going to say, people a lot of times they're very nervous and scared to deal with these tax agencies. A lot of times they bury their heads in the sand, not wanting to face it, and then end up with bigger problems in the long run. So I thought this was an important topic to discuss, to just give people some understanding of what is it that they can do when it comes to dealing with the IRS and what are some of those strategies. So before I get into questions, though, that I have for you on this topic, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you become involved in helping the entrepreneurs with these IRS issues?
That is why I became a tax attorney. And back many moons ago, when I entered law school on day one as a student, I was already a practicing CPA with a master's and bachelor's degree in accounting. And I worked for a giant firm whose clients were the Fortune 500. And I was boggled by these giant companies making all this money and legally not paying any taxes. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want to learn how to do that. That's why I went to law school, not to do divorces, murders, accidents. I wanted to know how to do that. And that's a major part of our practice. And there's another area too. Sometimes what you were talking about before, the IRS comes calling, and what do you have? A confrontation with the United States government. And yes, some people are nervous. And I'm going to quote from a great former president, "You have nothing to fear but fear itself." You have so many rights, and we enforce them for you. So the bottom line is, if you're being audited, that auditor is not judge, jury, and executioner. Mm-hmm. He or she has very limited rights. And if you disagree with that person, it's perfectly fine to go right over their heads, and there's a very effective system to deal with that. And when we talk about tax planning and saving money, you know, when I take a new client, one of the first questions I ask him is, so, who do you think makes more money, you or Apple Computer? And we all laugh, ha, 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 Apple Computer. And I say, but guess what? You pay more taxes than Apple. And then the laughing stops. And you say, well, why should there be such laws that allow people to take such advantage? And because there's two reasons for our tax law. Now, everybody knows about the first one. That's to extract money from us. But the second one is, in a democracy like we have, the government can't order us to do things, even if they'd like us to do it, or it's good for the economy. So how does the government get us to do something that they want us to do, but they can't order us? They pay us. And how do they pay us? They pay us in the form of tax incentives, tax deductions. And there's so many of them. So why doesn't everybody do this? And I call it the magic business card. And here's why I call it the magic business card. Suppose, Candy, I said, look, I have this magic business card. I'm going to hand it to you. And if you walk down to your local IRS office, they'll give you a check for $1 million. Would you do that? I thought you would. That was my guess. But suppose instead of handing you the magic business card, I took the magic business card and I went and I rented the biggest dump truck I could find. And I put the magic business card in there. And then I dumped in a whole bunch, a dump truck full of regular business cards. And I got a big boat oar and I stirred them all around. And then when you were out to lunch, I backed up the dump truck to your office and I dumped it all in your office. You come back from lunch and all the business cards, including the magic business cards, are all over your desk and floor and all over. You'd say, oh my God, what happened? Did some vandal or was it an accident? What went on? You'd call some cleaning service, say, clean up my office. And they would haul away all the business cards, including the magic business cards. That's what our tax law has. They're in there, but they're hidden. I spent a career finding out, well, where are they? As opposed to just handing you the one business card. So we have a client, Candy, here's your magic business card. And there's so much in here. For example, suppose you're a business owner, something simple like starting your own retirement plan. And I'm going to use the term pension accounts and retirement plans interchangeably, although technically there's some differences. And you might even say, well, I already have some plan, but you can have multiple plans. There's over 20 different types of plans. And there's 4 advantages to having a plan. 1, you pay less taxes. At that point, most people say, Steve, sign me up. We have other benefits too. Second benefit is your earnings are not taxed while they're in the pension. So no brainer. If your earnings are not taxed, they grow faster and bigger than if they were taxed. 3, special federal protections. People love to sue, especially suing business people. And if a jury awards the plaintiff an amount in excess of your insurance, one lawsuit can ruin your life, take away everything you've worked for in a lifetime, except your pension. And although I hate to mention his name, the poster boy for this is O.J. Simpson. Look at O.J. He's had a multi-million-dollar judgment against him for years, but he's not lost one penny of his pension. And you're watching this and you say, golly gee whiz, there it is, I've said it. And I said, oh, I'm watching this in year 2, and year 1 was such a good year. And I wish I had seen this, because I know with most tax planning, I have to make the deduction, or I write the check by December 31st, year 1 to deduct it in year 1. Not so with most pensions, but not all. You have up to the time of filing the return, including extension. So for a lot of taxpayers, that means that they basically have about 3/4 of the way into year 2 to set up the pension, fund the pension, and they have the option to still deduct it against year 1. How wonderful is that? And also that flexibility. Suppose you have a situation like this. You have a Boku year. Something special happens this year, and you make way more money than you normally do. And there's a term accountants use that I just hate, and the clients hate it. They tell clients, well, if you made a lot of money, then you have to pay a lot of taxes. Tell that to Apple Computer. So suppose whatever the situation is, you made an unusually large amount of money this year, and you say, I did a great job, but I don't want to pay all those extra taxes. With these pensions and the flexibility, you can have a situation where you make multiple pension plan year contributions in one calendar year. And when the smoke clears, you have multiple years deductions against that really high earnings. So you made all the money, but you put in extra pension deductions to offset it. So the bottom line is there's so much you can do. Another thing is, it's common that people have buildings in their business. They may be landlords, or they may use a building in business. And we have depreciation. So we know that if we're depreciating a residential property, it's 27 and a half years, and a commercial property, 39 years. That's a long time to wait for benefits. Time value of money, the way banks make money. A benefit today is more valuable than a benefit tomorrow. So there's something called cost segregation analysis.
Well, this topic has been great in terms of talking about how to save tax, but I know today we really wanted to also talk about when you're in trouble with the IRS, right? So
then let's switch to that.
Yeah, somebody didn't do all this and they owe tax, but they didn't have the money or whatever happened, whether it's payroll taxes, income tax. So like, how do they deal with the IRS to start working it through?
To deal with. When you're in trouble with the IRS, you might be being audited, or maybe a situation where you just don't have the money to pay. So let's talk about both of them. We'll start off with one that's real common. Somebody just doesn't have the money to pay. And in business, that is so common because, it's not like a paycheck. You get a regular amount of money every payday and the employer withholds taxes. You're in business. All businesses have ups and downs. One day you're making beaucoup. The other day you're checking your phone to see if it still works. Now you have a tax bill and you can't pay it. Well, we know the IRS is hiring all these new collectors. And President Biden said he expects the collectors to collect many dollars, multiple dollars, for every dollar he invests in the IRS. So what happens? What do you do? You have so many good options, but what you don't want to do is stick your head in the sand. Because if you do, then the IRS people can do really bad things to you. Like go to your clients, customers, patients, and say, don't pay you, pay IRS. That'll ruin you. A lot of clients will say, hey, you're in trouble. You're going to go out of business. I don't want to know you, and leave you. And plus, you don't want your bank account wiped out one day.
Right.
So basically what I would say is call us and we'll just do everything for you. And what would we do? Call the IRS and say, hi, we're representing John Smith. Please don't take what's called enforced collection action against him. Enforced collection action is anything from the very unlikely criminal prosecution of the case to the very likely to just seize your bank accounts, go to your customers, grab things. Let's just work this out. There's a lot of good things we can do. Let's see if you qualify for something called an offer in compromise. Offer in compromise is where we offer the government part and they forgive the rest. That's great. You basically literally walk away without paying most of your taxes, and that's fine with the IRS. Or another thing is ask for a penalty abatement. Sometimes penalties and interest can be more than the taxes themselves. Because what happens is another thing that's very common with taxes is people don't file returns. They just don't file them. It's a mistake. It's illegal. Government can put you in jail. And they also do something called an SFR, substitute for a return. So now you file the return, and the computer automatically puts a 25% penalty, failure to file penalty on you. And also there's a failure to pay penalty, which is a percentage that goes up every month up to 25%. So now we're at 25% plus 25% plus interest on top of that. And that could be a lot of money. So what happens is we go to the government and we say, hey, we're going to ask you to forgive the penalties. Now, obviously, if the penalties are forgiven, so that's zero, the interest on zero is zero. And there's a lot of good grounds for having the penalties forgiven. And you don't have to meet any specific ground. Any reasonable ground could serve to get you out of the penalties. That's wonderful. Another thing is you say, well, look, that's terrific. You've reduced my tax bill, but I'm broke. I can't pay. I can't pay right now. So then we say, well, let's see, how broke are you? maybe you can make some monthly payment. So we can get you a payment where you make small monthly payments over a period of years. And most people can do that. But say, well, you know what, Steve? You just lost your job, or your business just closed, or your spouse is sick and you're spending a lot of money for medical. You don't have any money. Then another thing you can do, instead of doing a monthly payment plan, is say, hey, give me a hardship deferral. That's where they just leave you alone until you're back on your feet. And then when you're back on your feet, we go back and say, okay, my guy found a new job or started a new business, or the spouse's medical conditions are in control now. Now let's work something out, whether it's an offer in compromise where we just pay par, not forgive the penalties, or monthly payments we can afford to work something out. So those are very common. What happens if you're with an IRS agent who's unreasonable with you? Mm-hmm. Now, like any large group of people, doctors, lawyers, any group you can think of, I look at a bell-shaped curve. Most people are in the middle just doing their jobs. But what happens if you have one of the tails? Now, you could have a good tail where the agent's just super nice to you, and that happens. But suppose you get the other side of the tail. And this agent, he just, is being really what you believe is unreasonable. If we got that agent that was just so unreasonable, what do we do? I tell you what I would do. I'd say, well, you're too tough for me. Issue your report. And then we go over his head. And there's something called a collection due process hearing. And you have to be careful with these things because when you get notice, you only have 30 days to file it. But a collection due process hearing is very powerful. And what this does is it takes the case away from the IRS collector and instead sets it up for a hearing officer, a higher person. Then we present our case to the higher person, and if we get something that's reasonable, then we're happy. But suppose this is just your bad luck day. You must have done something bad in another life or whatever, and you believe that the learned hearing officer in his or her discretion has abused their power. What do we do now? Then we go into the tax court. And with the tax court, we may be able to negotiate something with the IRS attorney, and oftentimes, as a practical matter, we can. But if you can't, you go to the judge and you say, okay, judge, here's why I asked you to grant me what I asked for. Now, during this time, the period I described could just be 2 years. So don't just say, oh, you don't have to pay taxes for 2 years. Pay what you can. Mm-hmm. So now most of the time, most people don't have to go all the way to the end of the chain. Most people will never see a judge. But for the purposes of our talk today, we're looking at the whole system. What happens if you're one of those few that has to go into tax court? Then you can, in good faith, say, look, judge, these past 2 years, although they couldn't take it from me, I paid everything that I could pay a month. How about just leaving it there and asking the judge for that? There's so much you can do. Where people really get in trouble is they stick their head in the sand and they do nothing. And then the IRS comes down and crushes them. Right. Or sometimes people will represent themselves. They don't know what they're doing. And remember, this is a legal problem. And the way the legal system is set up, it's an adversarial system, like a boxing match. And people don't realize that. And another thing you should never, never, never do is lie to them, because making a false statement, that's a felony. Those they prosecute. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is, you wouldn't try doing your own dentistry or brain surgery. Everything in our world now is so specialized. If my sink starts dripping, I don't say, well, I could figure it out, or I could look at a video on YouTube. I have clients that have done that and flooded their houses. It's just, you go to a plumber. And what happens here is, these are all things we routinely do for clients. It's nothing to fear. It's like if you have a medical problem, you go to the physician and he or she says, okay, what's wrong? A lot of times, most of the times when you go to a physician, your worries were way worse. You dreamed, oh my God, I'm dying. It's a horrible disease. And you envision all these horrible things, when in reality, most of them are minor problems and they're fixed that way. put an end to the worrying. And, with tax problems over the years, I have seen this cause so many divorces. I've seen businesses closed that shouldn't have been. And I saw one gentleman give up his kid for adoption. All that, it's heartbreaking.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be. It's like if I were a physician, I said, look, there's a simple medicine that would cure your problem. And look how you're suffering, and look what you did. Just take this pill and you'll be fine.
Right.
And that's what I'd say with taxes.
Right. Well, there's something I was thinking about. Well, there's a lot of things I was thinking about too, just, from experience that I've had even with clients and when they have their notices and things too. But one thing is, as you're talking, if they are having an issue, but maybe they didn't even know that there were credits that they could be taking, they can go back and amend tax returns from the past
That
and then
happens all the
take out
time.
some of this, as well too.
Happens.
And so it's important to have, like you said, don't do it yourself. Have a professional that can sit down with you and look at what did you miss on your tax return, and then reduce that debt because you didn't capture some of those credits.
Absolutely. We do that all the time. And especially for do-it-yourselfers, they miss so much. And then it also depends on who did your return. And I don't say anything disrespectful to anyone, but we've dedicated our professional careers to this, just like a physician. And a lot of times they say, well, who did your return? Oh, I had it done. Who did it? And it was somebody's aunt or somebody's friend, or, like dentistry. Your aunt may be a wonderful person, but they really, unless they're a dentist, they shouldn't be doing your dentistry. And you see these all the time. Or sometimes what will happen is somebody will go to a tax preparer that's not experienced, and they miss all types of stuff. We pick that up all the time. We say, well, yeah, sometimes when we do these, we actually find out the taxpayers do a refund. Can you imagine that?
Yep. Well, and I think too, when people don't always understand all of the things that they're supposed to be paying into, especially as a business owner, I should be making my estimated tax payments. I need to make sure I cover my payroll taxes. And when things get tough, they don't pay a lot of those taxes, but they still pay, the rent or the utilities or things. And I also am trying to educate people to let them know, like, if you have payroll and you're withholding from employees, like, you have to pay that tax first, right? Because that's someone else's money as well. And there's more severe penalties on that, correct?
Exactly. That's the worst one not to pay. And again, exactly as you said, it's kind of like if somebody's working for you, you withheld part of their pay to give over to the government. That's not your money. That's the government's money.
Right. And
you took the government's money, and they get really, really, really angry if you do that. And you never should do that. You see, that's where, I'm a practical person. So, I say to you, well, okay, here I have all these credentials and I'm in California now, but I had a very, very prestigious job when I lived in New York City. Would you like to know what I did?
Sure.
I was in the transportation business. I was a New York City taxi cab driver.
Okay.
I'm just a simple guy, and a lot of times simple solutions are the best. Suppose somebody is getting ready to make that horrible mistake, not pay their payroll taxes so they can pay their rent or pay a vendor or somebody like that. I said, well, wait a minute. Before we panic, how about if we call the landlord and say, look, you know what? I'm having a little problem now. How about if you let me pay the rent late this month and next month? And, if you don't penalize me, that would be great. If you do, I understand. And then you go to the vendor and you say to the vendor, well, look, my guy had a little short this month, so keep supplying him so he can keep selling and pay you all the bill. Let's work something out. And most people in business are not monsters. They'll work with you. And there's always exceptions, of course, but again, we're keeping away from the tails on the bell-shaped curve. Most landlords, most vendors will work with you. Most people you owe money to, they gave you credit to begin with. So if you think about it, if somebody will give you credit for a period of time, is it much of a stretch to make it a little bit longer period of time? Or maybe you can get, a loan from the bank or the SBA. There's ways to handle these things. Or maybe you can become more efficient with something. there's so many solutions, but don't, that's like going to a loan shark where, you never want to do that. Well,
Right.
you also don't want to not pay your payroll taxes. Things can be worked out. So basically what happens when a client comes, I certainly don't lecture Claire. You did what? Well, you shouldn't have. I just said, okay, people are human. These things happen. Look how much debt the United States government has. So let's be honest with each other. Because I'm an attorney, we have attorney-client privilege. So whatever you tell me is a secret. And we say, all right, let's work on this. And what do we have here? And in most cases, it's not nearly as bad as you imagine. It's like most people with medical. If you have something wrong with you, have a pain or something, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not practicing medicine, but most people, when they think they have something wrong with them, they envision this horrible, horrible disease. They go to the doctor, and usually it's something really minor. That's such a relief. No, you don't. You're not dying from the so-and-so disease. You just a minor thing. Or here's a pill. So the bottom line is, that's what I say to clients is, usually most things can be worked out. Most business people are willing to work with you. So if you say, look, there's just not enough money to go around, that happens in business all the time.
Right.
Let's work something out.
And sometimes the IRS is wrong too. I have a client, we help him with everything, and he's got over 50, the employees, the full-time equivalents, everything. He has to file the ACA, or he has the affordable care where he's got medical for his staff. And at one point he got a notice that said he owed almost $14,000 because they said he didn't have like the affordable insurance for a few of these people. And here's your shared responsibility portion. And so I submitted all the documentation that said, wait, here's what they had in terms of the amount they had to pay. Here's what they earned. It was less. I submitted all this information, and then they corrected one person and kept sending notices, and we kept going back, and I kept sending information, and it was like a year later and we were still getting these bills. And we finally got a tax advocate to look at the information and then go to the IRS and say, look, like they did everything correctly. This is actually incorrect. And then they fixed it finally. It just take a year, but it went from a $14,000 bill to zero.
You're dealing with the government, oftentimes things take way longer when you're dealing with private business. And one of the things I say to clients, that's why it's really good to have a professional represent you, because you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get angry. And then some people's response is, well, I did everything I could, that's it. Well, it's not it.
Right.
They're going to do something bad to you. So that representative won't get frustrated. The representative knows what to do. And they just do everything for you.
Right.
So the bottom line, that's what's needed.
And one other thing that I wanted to say too, because we've been helping clients claim the employee retention tax credit too, if they have the staff that they had on hand, they kept their employees and they qualify for this credit. There were some people that were really, really struggling and had some major cash flow issues. And by applying for that credit, it completely gave them what they needed to, pay some old amounts that they had from prior periods and have cash to continue operating their business too. So apply.
Finally, the government has done something for small business. Now here they define small as 500 and less. So the bottom line is, unless you're a qualifying startup business, which gets even more, I won't mention because it's a sideline. For most people, you can get up to $26,000 for every employee that you have during 2020 and 21. So, for example, if you had 10 employees, you get up to almost $250,000. 20 employees up to, just over $500,000, and so on. So the bottom line is the government's just giving you the money, and whatever amount of money you ask for, they give you even more than that because the government pays interest from the time that the payroll tax was done. Payroll tax return, the 941 was due until they write the check. The government actually gives you a check. This is wonderful. It's free money. It's even better than PPP, because with PPP, it started out as a loan, and then you had to swear that you spent the money on payroll and rent to ask for forgiveness. This one, they don't care what you do with the money. So the bottom line is, it's wonderful. And suppose you have this situation, and that's something I've done for clients too, where somebody says, they have this horrible tax flow problem. Their creditors have cut them off and they need the money yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, okay, well, what do we do now? With the client's permission, I went to the creditor and said, look at all the money my client's getting. And for a lot of clients, obviously everybody's fact circumstances are different, but a lot of our clients have gotten a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And, we've had individual clients that have gotten millions. Matter of fact, later today, I'm talking to a client who got $2 million. Mm-hmm. And lots of clients that get hundreds of thousands, 300,000, 500,000, 700,000, and smaller amounts too. And not everybody qualifies, a lot do. And remember, there's two ways to qualify. What trips up a lot of people, the first way is your gross revenue goes down a certain amount. But a lot of CPAs stop there because they only do the math. But there's a second way, a facts and circumstances way. And if you qualify under the facts and circumstances, even though your gross revenue did not drop by the required amount, you still can qualify for just as much money. And then you say, well, you can parlay that because we can go to the creditor and say, look, here's my client's 941X. This is the form we're filing with the government. See all the money he's going to get? This is a good source. You're going to get this money. So how about supplying him again? My client's not a bad guy. He just ran out of cash and it was a tough time. And when this check comes in, my client will pay you in full. You've made all these sales. My client still is doing business. Everybody wins.
Right. Exactly. And that's why we're trying to help people too. And we help the small guys as well, as we have had some that got, millions of dollars of credit too. But the point about that whole thing too is apply for it if you have those qualifications and you haven't yet, especially for 2020, like time is running out, right? There's, a few more months you have till early of next year to be able to claim that credit. And of course, one more year for the 2021, credits that are due, but this can help wipe out any past due tax that you have and the IRS will get off track, right? So I think that's one thing that I'm glad we talked about that. I think it's important.
And also it can hold off. I've had them hold off enforced collection actions where I say to the agent, look, my guy owes you X. You actually, with the ERC, you owe him more than he owes you. So let's do this. Lay off of my guy. You take your portion and give him the balance and everybody's happy.
Right. Exactly. So, well, I know we're running short on time. We barely started scratching the surface, right? Because there's so much that we could go into on the topic of, the offer and compromise, installment agreements, and what do you do when you have these issues? I can talk about taxes
all day, no problem, as I think you've seen.
Right. Yeah, there's so much that we could talk about. But if anyone does have any questions, maybe they do have some issues right now and they want to talk to you as a professional, how can they find you?
We do cases all throughout the United States. You can either call us at 888-TAX-DEAL. That's 888-TAXDEAL, 888-TAX-DEAL, or MoskowitzLLP.com, MoskowItzLLP.com. Talk to us for a free consultation.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Steve, for coming and talking about this topic.
Let's do what I like best, talking about taxes.
I know that's one of the things, again, so many people just really don't like this topic, but it is important to talk about because there are things that can be done if you do have a balance that is owed and you're getting those notices and you don't want the IRS to take the money out of your bank or, come knocking on the door. There are things that can be done to postpone that. So again, don't put your head in the sand. Right? Talk to a professional and get some help. So again, thanks for sharing your expertise. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview. And remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn and my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, AB&P is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.